Thank you. So tonight is really going to be a summary. I picked all the good bits from How to Write a Memoir, and I'm in the process of writing my own, so I'm going to be taking my own advice and reminders. So I'm going to go through, let's see, 9 different points of writing a memoir. You can take notes. I also have like 3 handouts I'm going to send to you. I'll actually send them to Cara, and then she can send them on to you right afterwards. So I'm going to start with a quote by Lynn Hagenin, and it's from the book The Art of Description by Mark Doty. Is one of the books I highly recommend to my writers. We delight in our sensuous involvement with materials of language. We long to join words to the world, to close the gap between ourselves and things. And we suffer from doubt and anxiety because of our inability to do so. So, so the first thing I'm going to start with is where we really need to start with our writing, and where when I do Write by the Lake and I do other retreats and workshops specifically on writing, this is where we start. This is where we start if you're lost in the woods and you don't know, how to start collecting your ideas and putting together, is you need to start with naming your subject and your theme. And that may sound boring, but it's quite exciting. It's actually a meditative process as well as it is a writing process, in that it helps us focus. And anything that helps you focus your ideas, focus your attention to the conversation that you're having around your writing, around your memoir, around you, because you are the main character in your memoir, helps. So the subject is basically the topic, right? So it's something like relationships. My memoir is about relationships. That's my subject. Now the subject is something anybody can write about. Anybody can write about relationships. Of course, it's going to be different. If you write a book about your relationships, I hope to God it's going to be different than what my book on relationships is going to be about. But that's the subject. Basically, that's the nutshell of a subject. It's universal. It's something anybody can write about, and it's a kind of general topic. What else is I going to say about that? Let's see, the subject it includes things like our encounters and our experiences, our pivotal moments. I'm going to talk more about that. All hold this universal thread to them. Even dealing with emotions, external events, transformation, obstacles, our suffering, insights, travels, dealing with evil or ugliness or beauty and loss. Basically, our humanity holds a universal thread, and our subject then is universal. And the other part is the theme, and you're going to hear a lot about the theme, and I mostly focus on theme. So like even in my Right by the Lake through the UW, which happened in June, the whole week is about theme, because theme is where the power is, theme is where the intimacy is and the vulnerability is, theme is where the meaning is. And it's also what brings up the most resistance is naming the theme. We often can name the subject, right? Oh, I'm writing about relationships. Naming the theme is a little trickier and can take a little while. So an example of a theme would be, it's more personal, it's the vulnerabilities, and it's the meaning within the subject. And it's personal in that it's unique, and only you can write about it. Only I can write about my relationships, right? So that ends up being the subject. So how can I fine tune that a little bit? And just to give you an example, so again, my subject is relationships. My theme is the men I left. Because what I realized as I was exploring my subject, which is what you need to do, while you're thinking about how you're going to write your memoir, is I realized that there's one theme that kept coming up in each of my relationships. Was in every relationship I've had in my life with men, and I'm heterosexual, so all my personal relationships in that regard, I left them. Nobody left me. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that's a theme, and that's a little interesting. So that becomes my theme for my whole book and putting it together. So that's something that you'll need to do. some of the things I'm sharing with you tonight are going to help you name your theme. After tonight and you go off and you start writing and you start wondering, you might find, oh, you come up with a couple different themes. Ideally, and I strongly recommend it, is that you identify one core theme for your manuscript, your book. If it's a blog, you do it for the blog, but we're talking about memoir tonight, so I'm going to stick with that. So for your memoir, you should have one core theme, and that's really important. So what I'd like you to do, because again, the theme is really the main part of writing. That's where everything comes together. That's your message. That's what makes it a memoir, because it's the personal part of it. Again, the subject being universal, it's not so personal. So the theme is only you can write about it. So it's really getting to that. So it's very intimate and it's very vulnerable. So some of what I'm going to be talking tonight about how writing memoir in particular, anything autobiographical, is a real expression of a vulnerability. And the more willing you are to be vulnerable in your writing, in your exploring your writing, and then transforming it into something readable for the reader, is a vulnerability. And it's so important to learn how to become more and more vulnerable in our writing. So what I want you to do tonight, and again, there'll be a handout with this. I just want you to take a couple minutes to name some pivotal moments in your memoir. Pivotal moments that stick out, memories that that are under your subject. So put your thumbs up if you're writing a memoir already. You already have a sense that you're writing a memoir. No? Yes? Yeah. Okay. No. Otherwise, so if you could kind of think of a subject that you're going to write about, because a memoir really just can't be just what this is Julie's life. You know, anybody could write about that. No, the subject would be my life, right? A story about my life. And not that if I was, you know, somebody that really stood out, but even that, even somebody who's well known, what makes their book readable and interesting and meaningful is there's a theme in there. They're sharing something unique with you. They're not just sharing that they're famous and that they had a wonderful life. So see if you can pick some pivotal moments. A pivotal moments would be ideally, and this can take a week or so to figure out, but they are subjective. You know, they are your subject. They fall under your subject, these pivotal moments, and they're also thematic. So for me, it's pretty easy. I just think of one of the men in my life, and then I just start thinking of the memories of the pivotal moments. So see if you can come up with 2 or 3. If you don't have a subject and a theme, which I don't expect that you would necessarily, just pick some pivotal moments in your life, because this is memoir. So it's all going to be pivotal moments from your life, regardless of what parts of your life you're going to be writing about or focused on. Just anything that sticks out in your life, that something that's happened to you or something you encountered, an experience you have. Okay, so I work from pivotal moments for all my books, my blogs, my every book I've written. I use pivotal moments, and I keep adding to the pivotal moments. And I also know with some pivotal moments I thought went in this piece of work, and no, it goes over here because it's not thematic or it's not related to that subject. So again, number 1 is naming and staying with your subject and theme. Not just naming it, but staying with your subject and theme. Everything that goes into your project, I'm going to call it, or your memoir, has to obviously be part of the subject that you're writing about, but more challenging, it has to be thematic. So that's number 1. So number 2 is being vulnerable with our lives and our stories. It's always going to be calling upon you. If you're really going to write something that's both going to transform you and help you learn and open up to your life even more, it's a vulnerable experience. The writing experience itself is vulnerable. And then you go from having a writing experience being vulnerable to being a very good read, because you're transferring that vulnerability. You're sharing that vulnerability on the page. And one way you do that is, once you choose your subject and your theme and you start writing, you don't stop. You finish the first draft and you leave nothing out. And that's what I want you to underline. You leave nothing out. Because the question that always comes up when people are writing memoir is, well, should I talk about Frank, or should I say that my uncle, it was my uncle that did this or that, or should I share how I don't like my sister, or, you know, whatever it might be. Usually it's negative stuff people want to leave out, right? Or it's stuff that, I hate my mother, should I really write that? I hate my mother? Yes, in the first draft, promise me, you'll meet that page in the most vulnerable way you can, and you won't leave anything out. Remember, the first draft is for you anyway. The first draft is to give you that full writing experience and not leave anything out, because if you leave something out, if you go, oh, I can't write that, and sometimes it's hard to write just simply because it's maybe a traumatic experience, or it's just painful to revisit it, but yet there's a part of you that wants to. If you stop, if you say, oh, I'm not going to put that in, I can write this book without that, I can guarantee you're leaving 3 or 4 other things out that need to go in the book or need to go in the memoir. Because that particular pivotal moment that's too hard to write or challenging to write, or you don't know if you should write it, has other stories attached to it, other scenes attached to it, that's going to come forward as you write it. So don't leave anything out on your first draft. I get that question all the time. And there's no reason to leave anything out, because nobody's going to read it but you, the first draft. And that tends to be true for the second, third, and fourth draft as well, until you are going to start getting closer to publication or sharing it on a blog or whatever. Then you will want to look at it and go, okay, what do I want to do with this? And there are many, many things to do with it. I'm not going to answer that unless you specifically ask me that question. I'm not going to answer the question of how do you take care of that then? How do you transform that story that you don't want to publicize because you don't want people to know you hate your mother, for example? How are you going to still share that full story and change that? So there's so many different ways to do it, and it depends on the particular piece. So when you get to that, find me and we can work on it. But most important, you just want to get the first draft done. That's your first job. So don't stop writing until you do, and don't leave anything out. So then, still with being vulnerable, we start with pivotal moments. All pivotal moments have a vulnerability to them. All pivotal moments are a point of vulnerability. So I'm going to show you that. Let's see, wait a minute here. Yeah, the more vulnerable you are, the more powerful your message will be. The only way to make something meaningful to the reader that is meaningful to you is meaningful to you because you're being vulnerable. So meaning and vulnerability translate onto the page. I'm going to share the screen here. I want you to take one of your pivotal moments. Okay, where is it here? Here we go. I want you to take one of your pivotal moments. Can you see that now? Oh, wait, hold on. There. Can you see this right here? Yes. Vulnerabilities?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that all you can see, or can you see my whole screen?
We just see the Word doc.
Okay, good. Okay, vulnerabilities then. So see how I have over on the left pivotal moments? So that's what I want you to do at some point, is make a list of your pivotal moments. Now these are from my last Right by the Lake. The first three actually, are my pivotal moments, just because I gave examples. So the first one is being baptized. I was baptized by a Lutheran minister at age 13. So that's just the pivotal moment. That's just sharing what happened, right? That's just the story. The vulnerability over here was the fear of hell. The reason I got baptized at age 13 is I was trying to cover all my bases. Just in case you really did have to be baptized to get into heaven, I wanted to make sure that I could. So I got baptized. That's basically it. But it was also my search for God. This Lutheran minister was amazing. So those are my vulnerabilities, though, to share those. And that should come out in my story. That should come out in that particular scene, is the vulnerability of it, okay? If I just share with you, I was baptized at 13 by a Lutheran minister. It was cool, that's not telling you much. I'm not being vulnerable. I have to share with you that I was scared of going to hell. And that's, that is a little embarrassing too, right? It could be. Our vulnerabilities can be, embarrassing. The next one was judging others at a retreat. So that's another scene, another pivotal moment. I was in a mindfulness retreat for 10 days, and I sat there on the cushion for the first 5 of them, just sitting there and looking around me and thinking how messed up everybody was. and we're in noble silence, nobody's talking. But what the vulnerability, because then I had a little transformation, and I ended up judging myself, and then I ended up getting to this place where everybody is lovely and wonderful and all that. But the vulnerability was, to really make this story meaningful to my reader and for me to learn from that scene, was me, really what it got down to is I just wanted to feel my belonging. And you know how we are sometimes. It's our judgment of others that keep us from really feeling our belonging, or judgment of ourselves. So that's the vulnerability there. And then another one is a story about getting a book. I got the wrong book. The cover was the right book, but inside was the wrong book, but it was actually the right book. So feeling my aloneness and my dependence. I was at a really dark time when that story happened. So I need to write about my vulnerability of feeling my loneliness and aloneness and my dependence on other people and on a higher power. So, and then you see other people gave examples. It's just the scene, the pivotal moment. Deciding not to wear a watch, letting go of expectations was his vulnerability. So that's what, and since there's only 3 of you, or 4 of you, including Kara, Erica, do you have a pivotal moment in a vulnerability? Like an example you'd want to share, or you can just say pass. Pass for now. Catherine, do you have one? Oops, you're on mute. Oh, there we go. You're on mute.
Okay. A fight I had with my husband on Montrose Avenue when he refused to get married in the Catholic Church, and I insisted we had to get married in the Catholic Church.
Okay, so that's the scene. Yep. And then what's the vulnerability?
Because it was possible. I mean, I was afraid he would choose, he wouldn't choose me.
Okay, good. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. And their story, and I've heard that story, that comes through. So that vulnerability is what we really want to have here in the story. Deb, did you have one you wanted to share?
Mine is, I received some damage from some mental health medication I took. The doctors had me on it too long, and it caused some issues that I was dealing with for a long time. So I still am. So yeah, I just wrote I was damaged, harmed by psychiatric medication, and I thought my vulnerability might be, I felt afraid and helpless, and like I would not get better.
Yes, thank you. And sometimes the vulnerability, obviously the vulnerability can also be in the story itself, right? But those are really good examples. And the more you can get to the vulnerability of it, then the more you can share it. Did you want to share one, Kara?
Well, my memoir would be about my senior year in college, when I had a little bit of a mental breakdown just from just everything that was going on. And so I guess like a lot of the pivotal moments were just being afraid of the future. So I would do something and I just was like panicked because I didn't know what was going to happen. So
Yeah, so it's just, Yep, afraid of the future. Yep, that's good. And each one too, like let's say you have a bunch that have the same vulnerability, right? So that may end up being pointing to the theme of your memoir. If the same vulnerability shows up in a lot of your pivotal moments, then it is probably pointing to maybe your core theme. So what you just shared could be a core theme, could be your core theme. Just giving that as an example. I just didn't want to pass you by, Erica, since there's just a few of us. Did you want, are you still saying no for now? Oh, oh, you typed it. I see several pivotal moments. I'm thinking a lot about my spiritual journey, but also wanting to leave a bit of a trail of memories for my children as they grow, maybe to leave them some answers that they may not otherwise know. Oh, that's nice. Yep, yep. So your memoir, yeah, is for family, which Catherine and I have somebody in our writing circle that is writing for her family. So that's nice. That I know several people are doing that, and that can be a really nice gift. And I vote that those stories be written as if they're written for the public, because one, they may end up being, and why not write as well for our family as we would for the general public, right? So yeah, and I think that can be a great gift. So I'm going to share one practice. I'm going to give it to you real quick, but there's a handout, so you can use the handout after tonight. So how to write from a pivotal moment is, again, you continue making those lists of pivotal moments. It's always good to name the vulnerability if you want. Then what I'd like you to do is you pick a pivotal moment you're going to write about, and you've decided already that it's related to the subject, and it's thematic. Or you just want to practice writing, and that's good too. So you pick a pivotal moment, and there's 3 stages of this. And the first stage is you just write the scene. Describe as much as you can, include the dialogue, any of the senses coming from the body, any of the senses coming from the scene, any detail. Just write out as much as you can and as much of the pivotal moment as you can remember. Don't worry about being fancy or anything, just get the story down. So that's the first stage. The second stage is take a break. Sometimes go take a break from it. Maybe go for a walk or go, whatever you might do. And then come back. And then I want you to write the meaning of what's the meaning of it? So draw out the meaning and the vulnerability. What makes this pivotal moment pivotal? What makes it meaningful? And that would be kind of like telling. You'd be like, saying, this is what makes this meaningful. This is what makes this meaningful. It could be a list, it could be bullet points, or it could be some more description of why the scene or why the pivotal moment was meaningful. Then again, you can walk away from it or just sit down and take a moment and then bring those two together. So stage 3 of writing from your pivotal moments, and you can write a whole book this way. I'm proof of that. Is to bring those two together. Ideally, especially in memoir, all right, especially in memoir, unless it's a spiritual teaching memoir, there's some flexibility here, but you want to get good at being heavy on the story and the descriptions and the dialogue, and light on the telling, light on the meaning. You want the meaning to come through the story. So when you bring the two together in the third and kind of final piece or the final draft, you're going to be heavy on the story, but the meaning is going to be weaved into it. Some people write the whole scene and then they might summarize it with the meaning. Some people kind of salt and pepper it with the meaning. You don't want to have too much tell. Again, light on the tell and dense with the story and the showing. And that's how I've written 11 books. And that's how I'm writing my memoir. So it works. And as I say to all my writers, if you end up doing this still differently because it works for you, do it how it works for you. Never, ever, ever, ever try to force something. Never take an advice from even a really good book and try to make yourself do what they're suggesting you do. Just kind of take it in and then do it either that way because it's natural for you, or tweak it and do it a way that is natural for you. Don't ever take a writing prompt and try to force something to happen. It's not going to work. If you just allow the writing to take you where it takes you, then all sorts of wonderful things are going to happen. So there's no rules in, how to write about these pivotal moments. This is just kind of a template for you to borrow from, and it's worked for me. And that's all number 2. So is there any questions about that? Since there's so few of you, you can just unmute and ask. Nope. Okay. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, when you said I didn't write it fast enough. When you said be heavy on the story and showing, what was the showing again?
Yeah, the showing is the first stage of it, first stage of the writing we're describing. And it is in the handout. It's really clear in the
Okay.
handout. So
Okay, good.
yeah. It just that I like to, it's always good to teach things orally. Orally is a great way to learn as a writer too, by the way. Because again, then you might have heard something a little differently, than Erica. And that actually sometimes works. Erica might have heard something completely different, and then she goes off and running on this whole different way of putting together a story, and it's working for her. So I'm a real believer in oral teachings, oral tradition of teaching anything, and especially, writing. And so, also trust what you heard and what kind of notes you take. Again, each pivotal moment holds thematic meaning and a vulnerability. And that's what will be in there when you bring it all together. Any other questions with that one? I'll move on to number 3. Okay, so number 3 is a little bit more of a craft thing, but it really helps with writing memoir and is important. You want to take out the maybes, the probably, and not sures. And you definitely, unless it's exceptional, and not every writer agrees with me, but I'm strong on this one, is you don't want to write what you don't remember and what you do remember. I don't remember my dad did I don't remember doing this, I don't remember that. That just waters it down, it distracts the reader from what you're getting at. Just dive in, obviously you're sharing what you do remember. And the funny thing is, once you start writing, you're going to remember more. You're going to remember more details, you're going to remember more of the physical and emotional experience of it. So do your best to take out the maybes, probablys, not sures, I don't remember, and even the I do remember, because that's obvious, right? And also what happens when we do that is we start telling something we should be showing. Just show us what you remember, and just leave out that you don't remember, because it's a complete distraction. Other things to leave out, basically, because they not, these aren't 100%, but practice, taking them out. What I do is I go through with the highlighter on Word document, and I just highlight things, and then I go back and rewrite. There is no editing. You should never edit your own stuff, ever, ever, ever. It's all rewriting. It's all recrafting, just like in a painting, Painters don't, like edit their piece. They keep painting it until it's done. We just keep writing and rewriting and writing until it's finished. And to me, that's part of the fun. I love having the first draft done. Then I get to go back and I start, taking it to its next level. So you also want to challenge, I'll call it challenging rather than taking out. The I felt, I saw, I knew, I wondered. These are all telling, and I'd like you to show us instead. A memoir needs to read like a good novel. Scenes, dialogue, showing, not telling, tension, and character development. And even writing for family members, it's really nice to just give them a good scene and let the reader, including family members, let the reader just figure it out for themselves. And don't insist that I have to have a certain experience. As long as I have a meaningful experience and I know the experience is meaningful to you, allow the reader to kind of have their own relationship with the scene, figure things out for themselves, kind of thing. So that's number 3. That's it on number 3. Oh, another thing you need, just like in a novel, is good character development. Good character development. Character arcs. So number 4, that leads into number 4, that you are the main character in a memoir. You're it. The reader's most interested in you. And that doesn't mean you have to come out and say, I'm this, I'm that. Everything in the memoir is reflecting who you are, right? It's showing what you feel about something, what you see about something, what you experienced in something. So that's part of it. So, but you're also the narrator. So you want to make yourself known. You want to know that, okay, this particular pivotal moment is really going to reflect who I am, is really going to say something about me. Because there's other characters in your memoir, I assume. So they're going to also take center stage sometimes, right? but it's still going to be your view of them. It's still going to be through your eyes. Not that you need to say that. We don't want you to say that. I think Frank is, you know, dot, dot, dot. You want to show us Frank, and we know it's through your eyes. But we want to make sure that you're known and make yourself interesting. Don't leave any of the juicy bits out. Don't leave any of the vulnerabilities out. Again, you know, first draft, what's the rule with the first draft? Put it all in. Put it all in there. So it's all through your eyes and body and soul. So let us know you. Open up that vulnerability and really let us know who you are. One of the best compliments I get on my books, and I hope that that's the case with my memoir, is that they feel like I'm in the room with them. It sounds like me. They just feel that there's this sense of, they know that I'm being intimate and vulnerable. I'm not in these spiritual books that I write. I'm not just like puppies and rainbows and come join me and you will be a light, enlightened and awake. You know, life is a friggin' mess and here's how I'm messed, but here's how I got through the mess, or something along those lines. But I don't leave out the vulnerable bits, right? And in fact, that's a good place to start, is with the vulnerable parts of yourself. You know, what's maybe one of the most vulnerable, pivotal moments in your memoir, in your life, you know. Start there, play around with that one. Nobody's going to read it right now but you. Maybe your guardian angel looking over your shoulder saying, oh, finally you got to it. Let's see, you are the main character. Remember, you also have a character arc. You are changing and evolving, right? You've gone through a lot of shit, right? I'm sure you have. If I have, you have. So, you know, so I've grown, I've matured, I've evolved into a better human being. I'm confident. I can say that confidently, that I'm still becoming, you know, hopefully I'll becoming in good ways. But so in a memoir, there's that character arc, you know. I happen to know, I'm not going to say anything about it, but happen to know Catherine's, you know, what she's writing about. And I'm just as interested in some of the things she's sharing about the context, you know, Karen, of your story, as I am about her character arc, because she's got a huge character arc in her story. And, you know, of course, she's the main character, so I'm totally interested in her. What happens to her? Where is she going to end up in all this, you know? And just because I'm sitting in the room with her right now doesn't mean I really know where she ends up. So if the character arc, your story, your arc is really important. And of course, there's a lot of vulnerability there. You're going to have to show us where you started out. You have to show us the different parts where your character developed or evolved and then finally made it over, at least that one arc, right? We all have it. So the reader wants that. And a character arc can be also defined as you start at one place internally and you end up at another place internally. And of course, this is all within the context of a life, you know, an outer life. Any questions about anything I've asked so far? Just unmute if you have one. I hope this is helpful so far. Yeah. So next one is, give us sister stories. In memoir, you cannot go from this happened to that happened to this happened to that happened, even if it's super duper interesting. Even if your life, of course, your life is interesting. All of our life is interesting. And that's, you know, the trick is figuring out how to make it interesting to the reader, right? That's what we're talking about tonight. But one way to do that, and one way not to put the reader to sleep, you know, is have what I call sister stories. They're, you know, think of your memoir as a tree, and there's branches. So your main memoir, your main story is, you know, the trunk of the tree, right? The main part of the tree. But then there's all these branches that come out, and those are sister stories. They're also related to the subject and they're thematic, but they can be anything. They can be about a object in the room. They can be about anything. It can be historical context. In a lot of memoirs, it's really nice to have some historical context or just some context about where the story's taking place or where that scene's taking place. Or you can have a sister story in memoir. So let's say I'm writing about an encounter with my aunt in Florida when everybody in my family was on drugs, and I went to the Southern Baptist Church in Florida. So I'm writing about that. I could do a sister story about my aunt. or I could do a sister story about the Southern Baptist Church, right? So it's thematic and it's related to the subject, but it doesn't keep the reader just going from this point to that point to this point to that point. So we give some sister stories. So consider that a spice. I love it when writers can do that really well, where we're in the moment with them, we are caught up in it, but then all of a sudden they give us a really good side story, a really good sister story. And then of course the trick is coming back to the present moment and then continuing forward in your story. And those are called transition sentences, or usually sentences, a couple sentences that are transition sentence, or the next sentence in the next paragraph is a transition line, a transition sentence. It's not something you worry about, but something that in the rewrite you will end up definitely working on transitions. Any questions about sister stories? Okay, and then the next piece is important and goes well with the truth, goes well with vulnerability. So in writing memoir, we're writing our truth. We're writing what happened. We can't make it up. We can exaggerate. We can draw out things. We work from memory, and it's all memory. So if you think the couch was green, it was a green couch, right? You also have to start trusting your memory. You have to trust that you do remember what color it was. And then once you start trusting your memory, you get more and more memory, more and more things come to mind. But it's truth versus fact. So you don't want to be writing about the facts. Facts are boring. Facts are the backdrop. Facts are important only in that they are like part of the container of the story, but they're not the story. All the story comes through the truth of the story. So if you go back to the vulnerabilities, the fact is in the kind of the name of the pivotal moment, getting baptized. That's a fact, right? I got baptized. Okay. The truth is it was a spiritual experience for me. It was, I learned that all water is holy water. That was the truth of that story. Remember, the vulnerability was about being afraid of going to hell or wanting to cover all my bases, but also wanting to have I wanted to be connected to God. I was in search of God, basically. And I won't say I found God there, but what I did is when the minister came back from going out and getting the holy water to baptize me, I was all ready for this, be blessed by holy water. He comes through the door and he says, "It's just tap water, Julie." He could tell I was like, oh, I'm gonna, but I was, that became the truth for me. It's all frigging tap water. It's all holy water. So that's the truth. That's much more important. That's much more important and interesting than the fact of I got baptized. Okay, so you want to draw out the truth of the story, and you want to draw out which is also drawing out the vulnerability. I have a handout with that, details, some writing prompts, some ways to help you write on the truth versus the facts, and I'll send that to you as well. So you're going to get at least 3 handouts to go over if you want. Again, the truth is the meaning of the pivotal moment, the vulnerability. The facts are just the background. I gave the example of being baptized. Okay, 7. Here's where it's partly something you learn as you go, but also it's something that after you've written the first draft, you come back to, and that is that every sentence counts. So one of the books I recommend for everybody is Several Short Sentences About Writing. And I think you have it at the library, right? Probably. I think because by Klinkenborg.
If we don't have it, we can get it, but yeah.
Okay. For some reason I thought you did because I mentioned it before, but Several Short Sentences About Writing by Klinkenborg. I can't remember his first name right now. Vernon Klinkenborg. And it's just a really nice read. It's not a bossy book. It's not a book that gets like all left brain. It's all right brain stuff, but it really helps you create these perfect sentences, because once you're done, like once you're getting into your second or third draft, by then you should be sitting down with sentences sometimes for hours. I'm not kidding, you know. Some of them will just flow, but now and again that sentence is just not working. Sometimes you just have to throw it away. Sometimes we have to throw the baby out too. You know, our little babies that we love that line, but it just doesn't go there. But you really want to know every sentence counts. Every sentence, the reader's reading every sentence, so every sentence needs to work and flow. And so spending time, you know, working with our sentences, which again I love. It's like, again, if you think in terms of being an artist, it's going back to your painting. You've got kind of the first part done, and now you're going to go and you're starting to fill in some of the details. And that, like I said, be willing to, and it's worthwhile to work with something for you know, hours. Sometimes you might be carrying around a sentence for, you know, for days, and then all of a sudden something just comes to you. It's you know, quite lovely, and it's worth it. It's worth it. Another important thing, especially because you're writing memoir, is not to be mindful of not filling in the blanks with all that you know. So you know everything. You had the experience. You were there. So when you were writing memoir or anything autobiographical, we fill in the blanks as we write. We think we got it down on the paper and we don't. And that again, that's part of working with every sentence. Does that sentence really say what you wanted to say? Did you really include enough? You know, did you really, is the meaning translating to the reader? Is the vulnerability translating to the reader? So you have to stop and read your own material after the first draft. Your first job is just get the first draft done. But after the first draft, you want to sit down and really make sure it's translating. One thing I have some of my writers do is, in their circle, is have somebody else read the material. When I do mentoring, I meet with my writers once a week, and they send me pages, and I sit and I read their pages they read their pages to me, or I read the pages to them, and we both listen to it, and they listen to it as a reader. It's different listening to your own writing as a reader as it is than being the writer. Because again, it's automatically you're filling in the blanks.
Erica had a comment in the chat.
Okay. Memoir writing is like training the overthinker to release the product of overthinking, but not by not overthinking. I like that. That's a good line. I'd keep that one. That is so true. Okay, so just make sure the reader knows what you know. And again, take out the extra words. When I'm getting writers to send me stuff, I try to get them to do that before they send it to me, because it's almost impossible for me not to do that when they send me their material. Any questions so far, or comments, since there's so few of us? Okay. So number 8 is about writing forward. So this is super important, and I find people having this problem of rewriting the first chapter or the preface or the introduction over and over and over again. I did that with my novel. It's not so, I don't do that with my memoir, because I'm just writing one man at a time, basically. So, you know, I'm not rewriting over and over a certain story. So, so it's really important that you write forward and that you stay in the conversation. So not only write the first draft first, meaning don't keep rewriting the start of the memoir or the same piece. Okay, so how I do it and how I recommend you do it is, let's say yesterday you worked on, you know, 10 pages, you got 10 pages done. Instead of going over those 10 pages, just go over the last paragraph or page, no more than the last page. Do a little rewriting, things you're learning, practice some of the things we talked about today, you know, or tonight, you know, reworking something, or, you know, what have you. Then write forward. All the rest of your writing time should be writing forward rather than rewriting, okay? And that's even when you're when your first draft is all done and you're going back to rewriting the whole memoir again, you do the same thing. You start where you start in the beginning, rewrite for 10 pages or 5 pages or 2. Then the next day, just rewrite again, just a paragraph or a page, no more than a page, and then write the rest forward. Always be writing forward until you're done. And you'll learn everything you need to learn. Everybody's writing progresses. Everybody's, as long as you're writing. And using some, go ahead.
I have a question. So I find that when I'm writing, I'll write a section and then I'll realize like, oh, well, that doesn't really belong here. It should be after this happens, or like rearranging things or like something like that. So how is that something with writing forward where I should then, if I realize something needs to move, like just keep it where it is, and then when I get to where it needs to move to, just, or like how would you do that?
Yeah, so if your first draft isn't done, I wouldn't worry about it too much. You might write a little note to yourself. You can do that right on the document, write notes to yourself, or you can have, what I do is I have a separate piece of paper, on my computer that says notes for chapter 1 or notes for this. And one of the notes will be move ... to ... or change the date or whatever it might be. So then you can go back and do that. If it's super easy to just lift and paste, just go ahead and lift and paste it. But you just, what I don't want to do is get caught up in doing too much of the rearranging and moving before you have your first draft done, because that's another thing people can get stuck in, is like, oh, this goes here, that goes there, and then I'm going to work on it. So just kind of like write the whole thing, write out as much as you can, get the first draft done. Doesn't mean you won't be moving a few things around because you realize, oh, that doesn't go there at all, that goes here. So you go lift it up, put it in, and then just keep writing forward. As long as most of your time is writing forward. Because I'll talk about that here a little bit. Resistance is a partner in your writing. There's a book that I recommend for all my writers, which is Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art. And he also has a great blog and a website. Just look his name up, Stephen Pressfield. He wrote the Legend of Bagger Vance. But he wrote a book for a friend who was in the middle of, he actually had pretty much finished his novel in the first draft, but he was just stuck then. He didn't want to do the rewrite, and he was in all sorts of resistance. So as a gift, Stephen wrote this book for him. And it's really all about how resistance comes up in our creative process. And the more important, the more valuable this book is to you, or this creative act, whatever it is, the more resistance comes. So that's the trick. When you're going, oh my God, this must not be that important to me, or I'm lazy, or I don't, what's wrong with me, or I'm stupid, or whatever it is, the bigger it is, the more strong that message is meaning the more important that creative act is. So that's kind of playing trickster with it. So you kind of bow to and go, aha, you're coming up big time because this is important to me. So you basically have to just put on your work boots and write, move through the resistance, because resistance never goes away. It changes and mutates. It never goes away. So it's part of the writer's life. So you want to become friends with it in the sense of recognizing it and not stopping your writing. So that's part of this one too, is staying in the conversation means ideally, one of the things to stay in the conversation is write every day. And if that seems like a lot, pick 15 golden minutes. 15 golden minutes a day where you're going to sit down and stare at the blank page, or maybe write in your journal, do some kind of writing, do a writing prompt. You're going to email me and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Do you have any writing prompts? And I have tons of them, so I might send you one, or whatever. Just you're sitting down for 15 minutes with your memoir. You're sitting down and writing a list of pivotal moments. You're sitting down for those 15 minutes and you're writing just about one pivotal moment. You're doing those 3 practices of writing about pivotal moments. If you can choose those 15 golden minutes a day, or 5 days out of the week, or 6 days out of the week, try to pick the pivotal moment when it could segue into half hour or an hour of writing. You know, doesn't have to though. You could get a novel done in 6 months with 15 golden minutes a day. Think about it. You get your memoir done in 6 months. So, you know, 15 golden minutes is plenty. Usually it does segue into a little bit more writing, but you're going to be amazed how much writing you get done. And every time you do sit down for those 15 golden minutes that you've committed to, you're moving through resistance. You're beating resistance every time. And resistance, like I said, stays, but because you become more and more conscious of it and you work with it, it doesn't hinder you as much because you're onto it, you're wise to it. So the 15 golden minutes is good. Another way to stay in the conversation is to carry a field notebook with you. I also use my phone now when I'm walking or biking. It's easier just to go, Siri, take a note. Sometimes most of the time it translates into something I understand. Sometimes I lose a brilliant idea because I'm like, what did I write? What did she take down? You know, she did not quite take it down right. But, you know, stay in the conversation. Once you've decided on your subject, and once you've decided on your theme, you've got your pivotal moments, you might be in a conversation around your theme. You should always be in a conversation around your theme until the book is done. But you can be in a conversation around a particular scene too, right? A particular pivotal moment. And the beauty of that is when you're in this conversation, all sorts of things show up. Synchronicities, somebody shares a book with you. You're starting to see things more that are related to your theme. You can hardly stop yourself from writing. When you're in the conversation, you are writing even when you're cleaning the toilet. All right? You're not writing when you're cleaning the toilet if you're not in the conversation. All right? So as long as you stay in the conversation, you are writing. Because it always gets to a point where you just have to jot that beautiful, brilliant idea down, or you have to sit down and write a scene. Because it's not going to want to stay. Don't cheat though. Don't have this brilliant idea and you can tell Siri, but you can't tell anybody else. You have to write it down first. If you go tell somebody, because you're going to have brilliant ideas when you're in the conversation, you're going to have all sorts of ideas, how you want to share your story, what's meaningful to you, what you want to teach your reader, what you want to share with your reader. But if you go share it with your partner, or you go share your brilliant idea, you know, over coffee with a friend or what have you, your subconscious mind goes, oh, aren't I creative? Aren't I smart? Aren't I brilliant? And your friend, of course, is also going to think you're brilliant. So you're off the hook. You're not pressured to go down and write it in your memoir or in your book. So, you know, don't speak it, at least until you've, you know, written it down. And again, especially until you've written the whole draft down. Especially when you're in the idea stage. You want to work out all that stuff on the page because miracles happen. Wonderful little sweet things happen. So to stay in the conversation, again, 15 golden minutes. What I recommend is in the beginning of the week, like so on Sunday morning, sometimes it's Monday, but usually Sunday morning, I kind of plan my week. I consult the I Ching for the week. I script for the week, I want my week to look like. And then I pick what my 15 golden minutes are going to be, and I color them in my calendar. And if you just use an electronic calendar, you can have a little pop-up that says 15 golden minutes. So you don't let anything get in the way. If you have children, then you know they can be in front of the TV or whatever you have to do to have your 15 golden minutes, or if they have to be in the room coloring with you, you know, coloring as you write. But do your best to keep those 15 golden minutes. It'll make a huge difference. And then again, keeping notes. Another way to stay in the conversation is exploring a question or an idea. So you're writing about something, and you know, since this is autobiographical or a memoir, it might be a question about, you know, what is the meaning of this pivotal moment, or why is this pivotal moment meaningful to me, or what was that person doing there, or what do I want to write about this pivotal moment? What do I really want to share? So staying in the conversation with it by, living this question, asking the question as you're going on your walks or you're cleaning your house or you're making a meal, you got that notebook there, or you got your phone there, and you're going to write down little notes. And then you're going to end up writing, you're going to end up writing 11 books like I've written 11 books, and nothing's going to be able to stop you because you're just in the conversation. It's not going to be so hard. I'm not going to say there's not resistance. And fiction's harder for me, and memoir is a little more challenging for me than the spiritual, memoir books were a little easier for me because that comes from that part of me that's a therapist too. So it wasn't that hard, but I did not know how to write shit when I in college. I had to go to the writing. I know I shared this in one of the other library sessions. Is that I had to go to the writing lab at the UW because my writing was so bad. He goes, but he gave me a C because he thought my idea was brilliant. And and the reason I share that with you is because your ideas are brilliant, right? You have a life, you have these stories you have to share. So it's about, sitting down and giving yourself that time to write. And I didn't really learn much from the writing lab. Of course, that was more about writing papers. I just learned from sitting down and writing. My first book was rejected, rejected by the publisher, but the editor said, again, it's such a good idea. I'll help you. So she basically sat down and helped me write my first book. I mean, I obviously had to do the writing, but she'd look at it, give it back to me. And that publisher rejected it. And she said, go on and send it out to main publishers. And I got Doubleday, So just believe in your idea. It's worthy of every moment you give to it. And but the trick is that it's not really a trick. It's magical, is to stay in the conversation, have it be, don't just be in the conversation on the page, be in the conversation off the page. So that's 8, but I have 9 out of 8 because I always have another one, because the 9th one or the last one is always about no rules. Follow your own writing ideas. Let your writing take you where it takes you. When I'm working with a writer, sometimes their biggest problem is also their biggest gift. So like, for example, one woman's writing about her life, and she's using recipes to write her life. And she's very a quirky writer. She writes a lot about her thoughts, and she's sarcastic and humorous, and that's tricky. It's hard to do. And so how do I help her write that, keep that true to her voice? Because that is part of her message is, isn't life strange? Isn't life funny? This is how I think it's strange and funny. And here's a recipe to go with it. So she has to stay true to that idea, and yet at the same time, translate her writing in a way that, becomes meaningful and readable to the reader. So what I'm getting at when I'm sharing that is, it's most important, even if it takes her a while, it's most important that she keeps true to her way of messaging, her way of setting a message. And so trust that you already have that. You already have that. And so that's another magic of just keep writing. Don't take too many how-to classes. When you read a how-to book, make sure that it's that you just let it I let it just sort of drop down into my consciousness. I don't sit there and I don't try to make my sentence fit into what this person's saying a sentence should look like. But I go, oh, that's interesting. That's a good way to do it. I kind of forget it consciously, but trust me, if you're reading how-to books, enough of it's getting translated into your writing, and then you're just going to keep writing better. You'll always keep writing better. And of course, the librarian will agree with me here. Read, read, read. So there's 2 books that you ought to be reading while you're writing a memoir, or writing anything for that matter. One book is a quintessential book that is a book like you'd like to write. You look at that book and you go, I would like my book to look like that, or feel like that, or read like that. Obviously you're not going to write exactly like them, but you are going to steal like an artist from them. You're going to borrow from them. You're going to learn from them by reading that person's work, and also sometimes copying them. not plagiarizing, copying them in terms of learning how to write like them. And the second book is a craft book, picking a good craft book. A good craft book for memoir writers is Your Life as Story by Tristine Rayner. Ta-da. That's one of the good ones. If you really are writing memoir, that's a good book. Of course, Several Short Sentences About Writing is a good craft book. The Art of Description is a good craft book. So picking a good craft book. This is a good memoir book. Have you heard of her? She just likes little vignettes. It's all little stories. This is the book I'm stealing from for my memoir book. Hope in the Dark. Untold History's Wild Possibilities by Rebecca Salnit. She's written quite a few other ones that are popular. I can't remember what they are. But so find a quintessential book and find a craft book to work from and work with. That's pretty much it as far as instructions, guidance. I will send out the handouts. So now it's kind of open to questions that you might have.